Welcome to Street Smart Podcast. Guest today is Chad Harman. Chad recently relocated to Texas from Colorado. He started a business a couple years ago, Psycheceutical, and man, I'm interested to meet you. Met you a month or so back. We have a mutual friend here in the neighborhood, and they also relocated from Colorado. So you guys are moving to the great state of Texas, which we love that. But you and I chatted, and immediately was really interested in your business, obviously, but just the mindset going into it, and especially into a field that is sort of gaining traction, but not necessarily in the mainstream for sure. And just really, really interested to kind of get to know you better. So thank you so much for coming out to the home studio today. But thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Honor, pleasure to be here today, and certainly looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so like we were talking before, the concept here is just, hey, you and I just sat down at a hotel bar on a business trip and just happened to meet each other and start a conversation, and sort of like they would say in the Fight Club movie, almost like a single serving friend, right? But in this case, I just want to have a conversation around, who you are, because the idea here is that for you to be an entrepreneur takes a specific mindset, and it takes a willingness to kind of hang it all out there in some cases. And I'm very, very interested in the stories and the past that made up the person that's able to do that. So with that said, man, where are you from?
Yeah, from Southern California, Oxnard, California, a little beach town in Southern California. I had a great childhood growing up. Lots of great friends. And then I think going back to entrepreneurship, I knew early on, I had a real passion for helping people, and I really thought I was going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And then, as I got older, and I think it's more of kind of that ADD mind that I have, I just couldn't bear, 8-10 years of my life.
Oh man.
In school. So that was something that I was like, well, I just can't do that.
Was that something that you made peace with when you came to that realization? Like, oh man, I really want to be a doctor, but man, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, and you were okay with that?
Yeah. I was absolutely okay. I always knew I had an entrepreneurial spirit when I was growing up, so I had always hustled, whether it be doing lawn care in the neighborhood, delivering papers, working for my dad's friends, doing concrete work, sandblasting, painting early on. So doing some heavy construction work. Gosh, when I was in 12, 13 years old, lifting 100-pound cement bags back then. So, for me, I was always wanting to work. I wanted to learn business in particular. I saw both my grandfathers really do extremely well in the business world. So that to me, going out and wearing the suit and tie, that was
right.
That was ingrained with at a very, very early age.
Yeah, I remember thinking to myself, man, if I could ever have to fly for business, I've made it.
Yes.
And then when I started having to do it, I was like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah.
I wish that this didn't happen. But
right.
Did you? So you say both your grandfathers do well in business. They're entrepreneurial, or are they just?
Yeah, they well. So my one grandfather, he actually ran all of West Coast distribution for Kmart.
Oh, okay.
So he was,
our younger listeners may not know Kmart was an amazing store. It was the Walmart of yesterday.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but we unfortunately lost my grandfather. Gosh, when I was just a year old, or just before I turned 1, and so that was a traumatic experience, for my mom, and it really kind of shaped me who I am today in terms of seeing that deep-rooted trauma of her losing her father at such a young age, and her battling some of the mental illness that comes with that, right?
Sure.
Obviously the severe depression, PTSD that she had, seeing her father really go downhill very quickly. So again, for me, seeing my grandfather's old photos and seeing him dressed up, but also understanding that I wanted to help and heal people because I saw my mom go through that. Obviously I was too young, but as I got older, to see that impact was really profound in my life. And so I made it kind of my life's mission that I wanted to help and heal people through that. So,
man, that's amazing. And so then your other grandfather, was he an entrepreneur, or did he just, again, achieve success similar to to your mother's father?
Yeah, so he was part of the gas company there in Southern California. So he was a manager, but he also had his own garage.
Yeah.
He loved working on cars. Him and my dad, they built many hot rods for friends and family, and so they're real gearheads. And so to see him, really work, at 8 to 10 hours a day at the gas company, come home, eat, and then go right back out until midnight at his own garage was very impactful for me, because I said, that's what it's going to take to win in this world, right?
Yeah.
Not everything is going to be given to you on a silver platter, and if you want something, you got to go out and get it. And he was like, look, this is my dream, my passion, to open up my own garage, and I'll work for it, and I'll make those sacrifices. So for me, early on, seeing that drive and ambition that my grandfather had really played a pivotal role and shaped me as an individual.
I think that can't be understated. Just the impact, number one, watching someone in your immediate vicinity work like that. I watched my dad's owned businesses pretty much my entire life. He recently retired, but he's owned businesses, and I've watched the ups and downs of that, and the sacrifices that he's made to make sure that others, continued to get a paycheck when maybe he didn't take one, and those things, and that can only be described as either a mental illness or a passion.
Right.
And maybe sometimes they're both, but it is definitely something that you have to work really, really hard at, and it's going to take a lot out of you, and a lot potentially out of the people around you.
Right.
So it's important to know that going in, I think.
Absolutely.
So you watched that as a kid growing up, and then you decide, okay, well, the doctor thing's just not for me, but I still want to help people. So what was the first iteration in your mind, of how you could do that?
Yeah, I think with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, we get into, various, and for me it was, trying out various multi-level marketing opportunities, right? I was always a hustler. I'm an introvert for the most part, but I have this extrovert side to me. When I get involved in something and I'm passionate about it, I have no problems talking to people,
Sure.
even if it's just a cold call or whatever.
I swear, man.
It's all good.
Yeah. There's the joys of home office and home studio.
Right? I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah.
I have the same thing.
Oh, God. They're the loudest animals. And, like I said, hey, will you text me when you get here so that they don't lose their mind? And it didn't work at all as soon as we rounded the corner. But anyhow, so you were saying that you had the first ideas around that, and you always hustled and those things in multi-level marketing. Did you sell Amway?
No Amway.
Okay, good.
So friends in the neighborhood did, but I'm like, that's not.
I got tricked by a girl one time. She invited me over for dinner, and I was like, yeah, she likes me, and she pitched Amway, and I was like, oh, the bait and switch. She got me with the bait and switch.
Hey, we've all been there, right?
She got me
pots, pans.
This is a strong bait and switch, man. I bought so many Cutco knives from people for that reason, but anyhow, so. So that's always been in you then. Just if I want it, I'm going to go get it, and I'm going to grind to get it.
Right.
Did you ever have a what I would call a W-2 job? Did you ever have a job where you worked for somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I, at 18, I worked construction, and then I found a warehouse job, and then through an ex-girlfriend of mine, her aunt worked for Anthem. Well, it's Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield now, but it was Blue Cross of California back then. We were just one entity in the state of California, and so I interviewed. I got a night position there, working claims operations, and again, I think that's where I looked at this job and I said, look, how can I get to XYZ position, right? How can I be at that time it was you work yourself up to a lead, then you go to supervisor, manager, director, VP, and you follow that kind of stair step or corporate ladder model. And I was always saying, how can I provide extra value? How can I outpace my colleagues? And so, for instance, when I really looked at that model, I said, all right, how long is it going to take me to, get to that lead level? And most people, it was 5 to 10 years. I'm like, how can I do that in 12 months?
Yeah.
Right. So,
and it goes along with that, this extreme self-confidence that, they do it in years. I can get this done in 12 months.
Right.
And I've had that same self-confidence in my career. And then when it didn't happen, I remember thinking, what's wrong? What's happening here? Did you face the same type of thing? Did you see and, man, this is not happening in 12 months? Or were you able to climb faster than what you'd anticipated? Yeah.
So certainly I was able to. And, in that model, you have to look at those opportunities. And I think a lot of people get stuck, Justin, in thinking they have one path when there's multiple options always available to you. And, people get afraid of trying new things or looking at just different options that are on the table. So what I did is I started off at, night on the night shift. There was immediate opportunity literally 3 months later to go on the day shift. And so I took that. Supervisor was not too pleased because I showed extreme value early on.
And the night shift probably is not that easy to fill.
No, exactly. Exactly.
So when they get a good one, they get kind of protective over them.
Yeah. And that was my first lesson. Like, here I was 3 months in, and I'm kind of set myself up to be the star of, kind of the night shift team. And then, I have an opportunity to move up quickly, and the supervisor was just not my friend after that. So, a lesson, A
lesson learned, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But again, you're there to progress your own career.
Correct.
And so, again, when you're in the corporate environment, as you well know, you have to take opportunities, and you have to look out, not only yourself, you certainly have to look out for the organization as a whole, but at the end of the day, it's their job and it's leadership's role to, backfill those positions and
Correct.
give every individual an opportunity to achieve success and to, hit their own goals and milestones.
That's right. And if they don't make that available, the good ones will leave.
Right.
They will not be able to maintain a professional level of employment, because the good ones will go, well, if I can't move around in this organization, then this is not for me.
Right.
So that's great. So you're moving up now. So you on day shift, and how long were you there?
I was there for probably about 15, 16 months before I found another position where I could get to that lead level. So literally kind of fast forward. And here's what I did, right? I worked every available weekend I could. I asked my boss, my supervisor, hey, what kind of special projects do you have? So I was just asking, what else can I do to help you? And through the first 16 months there on the day shift, I took the standard metrics of, claims processing. Back then you did 25 an hour. Well, I did 100 an hour. You did correspondence. You had 15 or 20 of those. I did 60 or 70. So whatever metric they gave me that was average, I just blew it away. And again, just going in and asking my boss at the time, what else can I do? And I really started to learn more about the systems and the back end. How can I improve the overall experience, and how can we reduce the overall process time and quality and efficiency of our systems? So early on, I knew that how can I fast track my own progress, but also make the company better and streamlined. So my supervisors and leadership really picked that up. So I started to take on, ultimately other roles with working on projects with IT. And so that led to another role, which was a lead position So collectively, it was less than 2 years that I achieved that lead position, just by
putting yourself out there and doing it in a genuine way. Like, you truly wanted to help. It wasn't lip service. And in that moment, were you, as you're doing that, are you thinking, all right, I'm going to learn these different systems and these different, parts of the company so that I'm well versed and can move around this company pretty much where I want to go? Or were you thinking about it, hey man, I want to learn this stuff because it's going to set me up later in life for something else that I want to do?
That's a great question. Initially, no, Justin. I was just curious by nature, and for me, I just wanted to learn everything I could because I'm just a sponge. I'm constantly learning. Half my time outside of work is just spent, personal growth, learning new things, delving into areas I have, no knowledge or experience on, and I thrive in those environments where I'm just an insatiable learner. And so what transpired as a result of that was, a couple years later, really seeing what you just talked about, seeing that that drive and ambition and that appetite for learning was so strong that I was seeing my peers and others in the company not taking that same route. And so I said, I have an opportunity to have a leg up on everybody in here because I'm not afraid to go out and put myself out there to apply for new positions, to open myself up to new challenges that are hard. So I just had this mentality that if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, but I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to take that as a stepping stone and build upon that. And I think a lot of people they see failure as a negative, and I see that as a stepping stone, and that's just a building block of success.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think a lot of people would be. So many times I watch people, especially with entrepreneurs that are successful, focus on their current success and have no idea how many failures, maybe not failed businesses, but how many things that they didn't quite get right. Or they failed at, that, like you said, they didn't look at it as, well, that's it. I knew this wouldn't work. They looked at it as, oh man, I got to figure that out so it doesn't happen again.
Right.
And I think that's an important message for anyone. That your failures, you're gonna have them. Everyone does. It's just really how do you respond to them, right? So, how long were you at that company?
20 years.
Oh man,
20 years.
20 years. Yeah. So you did the corporate thing for 20 years, and so in those 20 years, obviously, we've talked about the first 15 to 24 months right here. In those 20 years, where did you end up? Where did your career end up in 20 years?
Yeah. So, again, it goes back to, just learning everything about let me take a step back. Certainly learning and having that drive to really put all the pieces together as a business and expand my knowledge and expertise. So what was great about that is it exposed me to it exposed me to many of the leaders in the organization, and we had a massive organization, and so just to put that in context, we started with Blue Cross of California, and by the time I left, we were in 14 states,
sure, and
growing at that point in time. So we went from this very small operating entity to a Fortune 30 company by the time I left. So
a monster of a company.
Yeah. So I saw I was a part of a lot of the mergers and acquisitions. Part of the due diligence team and the integration team. So I really looked at all those avenues and areas to go into. Went from operations to leading large scale projects in IT. Then moved back to operations to really run as a business consultant. Kind of being, and I really found a great niche for me and for Blue Cross at the time, was really bridging the gap between business and IT. There was no, at that point in time, early on in my career, you didn't really have this collision course of IT and business. You had this great separation, but through my experience and again having those project experience on the business side that led to the IT role, then came back on the business side and really utilized my strengths in both areas to, again, drive process improvement changes, to look at efficiencies with our staff models, creating reports that allow our executive leadership team to really make key critical business decisions. So I really started to understand the inner workings of business in general and what drives those measurements or metrics. So early on, and again, remember that I'm 24, 25 years old.
At this point, yeah.
I'm still very, very young. And so what that led to is further growth and exposure at the leadership level. And so then that propelled me into a finance position. Then I went to sales and marketing, and then ended up in business leadership into our Medicare, Medicaid, or Medicare division there at the end, where we had 14 states, $2.5 billion operating unit. So we were leading $100 million projects, and I was leading executive roundtables.
Sure.
And remember, I don't have a degree. So
right.
Throughout
I was going to ask if, because you're like, okay, so you started at 18 and then you're doing all this. I was like, when did you go to college? You probably didn't. And that's okay. Because I don't have a degree either. But very similar to your story, I've been able, I was also enamored as a young kid at the guys carrying briefcases and wearing suits. And I was like, I want that. And then also similar to you was like, I am really struggling with school. Not that I can't do the work. I just don't want to.
Right.
Like, it really is frustrating. And I never in that moment considered, well, I guess I won't do that then. It was like, I'll figure out a different way to get there. And same thing. It was always raising, I'll do it. I'll do it. And so, I would imagine if you're leading executive roundtables, they got degrees and probably pretty prestigious ones. And so the question I have is, how did you establish credibility with that group without one? Or did they just assume you had one?
Well, I have to take, I have to give credit to my boss at the time, Rhonda Clark, and it was great. I was seeing on LinkedIn just, matter of fact, yesterday, she's worked her way up now. She's VP of Medicare and all over growth strategy. So I give her credit because she really put me out there. She saw something in me through working in various projects that we were both on, and so she hired me on. And she saw again that I was able to really tie the business and IT aspect greatly. So we were responsible for all of our sales and marketing tools, all of our large projects, and where I was an excellent communicator with a lot of our various levels of leadership. So I can really tailor my communication style to all various levels of the organization to really connect and have meaningful conversations and achieve those results. So for us, or for me, that was instrumental into getting that exposure, and then overall putting well. And I give you an example. What really propelled me in that position was we had taken over all the financial reporting for the organization, and early on we started to really dig in, and I had myself and my team, we looked at the data and we said something's not right here. And sure enough, we went back and it goes back to going through and understanding the process and really digging deep into what's driving those metrics. And so we had to strip away all these homegrown systems and these feeds and really understand what the data was telling us in a stripped out manner. So long story short, we recreated all the feeds, recreated all the reports, and so now the executive leadership team had all the metrics and measures to really run their organization. They were struggling with not having accurate reports, not having timely reports, and to be able to call out where key critical business decisions really truly need to be made. And so again, my team, we did an amazing job. They did an amazing job of giving our executive leadership team the tools and metrics they needed. And so through that, because I understood the data, at that point, you can really relate back and really call out to all the executive leadership team, hey, here's how we're performing to metric. Here's some things in the data that I think we need to discuss and have a conversation about as a group. And then it goes back to, in my mind, how can we alleviate some of those problems, whether it's front-end system problems where there's maybe some data entry errors, where there's a feed that needs additional data elements to make it more robust and we can make those key decisions, or how can we incorporate business use cases into our overall system, so having more predictive type of levers that we can pull. So those are all the things that my mind immediately go to, and as we're going through these meetings, we can start to have actual solution conversations versus, all right, this is an existing issue we've had for many years, and we've tried to fix it, but it never had. And so I think that's where I came into play, where they saw, okay, great, we've got a problem. Well, we can really talk through and provide a solution and implement it. So that's
and by doing that, you're going to establish credibility with any room you're in, right? So that's fantastic. So now you're leading these teams. You're really making improvements in areas that probably are saving people hundreds of hours of time in some cases. I know if people took the time to figure out how to integrate IT solutions like with Wildcat, the company I work for, I'm VP of safety. I was like, hey, can I rebuild SharePoint? And they were like, sure. And I was like, it can do so much more than just hold documents. And we've improved our overall process of doing business by doing that. So I think if people understood, how valuable that can be, the problem is it just takes someone in the organization, number one, willing to do it, two, able to do it, and then the organization to be willing to let you do it.
Right.
And it sounds like you had that there. So you spend 20 years there, and then you decide, you know what, I'm going to start a business, or
it's an interesting story because, again, it kind of leads back to our relationship. So I was there in Parker, Colorado. Again, 2009, my wife and I made the decision to move our kids. We had a growing family at the time from Southern California, Ventura County area, to Parker, Colorado, where we had some friends.
And Parker's basically just a suburb of Denver.
Yes, just a little south of the airport there, and a beautiful, wonderful community. We loved every moment of it. And so in Parker, we moved to our second house. We moved to a very nice neighborhood, 5 acres. It's a wonderful place for the kids, and we met our neighbors, which is your neighbor now, Kevin and Gretchen Harper. So I met them. We became fast friends. We had some of our kids are in the same age group, so we developed and had a great relationship. And Kevin was a regional vice president of an investment advisory brokerage firm, and so he and I cultivated a wonderful relationship. And towards the end of my career at Anthem, it became very apparent that I was taking a look at my life, and I was saying, I've got still probably 30 years left of working, and I've done a lot, and I've achieved many milestones, even more so than I could have imagined. I have a wonderful boss and great team. But I was just lacking in motivation and ambition, because I didn't have a clear vision of what my life looked like beyond the kind of current role that I was in. I couldn't see beyond that, and I had done.
And you're thinking, am I going to do this for the next 30 years?
Yeah, you certainly take a look at that.
Sure.
And so I had to take a step back, and I said, do I want to do this for the next 30 years? And one of the earlier key moments, two things is, one, I had to lay off half my staff, and many of the staff that I've had relationships for 15, 20 years growing up in the company, and having to tell your staff that they're being let go after, in a lot of cases, 30 and 35 years. And this is all they've ever known.
For no other reason than there's a business reason.
Right.
Yeah, that's tough. And I'm lifelong oil and gas, and we are no strangers to being laid off. When times are good, they're great. When times aren't, they're just not. So
right.
You're right. That is awful.
Yep. And then I was seeing, that was a pivotal moment, and it really got me thinking. The other moment was when I heard some of our older individuals on the team, getting up 60, 65 years old, see some of them retire and then come back, and having lunches with them, which is amazing to see them again. Mm-hmm. And then they're just like, wow, I spent so much time in one company, one industry. I really didn't learn beyond my first 15 or 20 years, which was again where I was at in growth. Beyond that, I did the same thing
every single day
and over again. And now I'm retired, and I still have people and memories, but now the people are so embedded into their day-to-day job that you lose connection.
Correct.
And you think you have this work family all figured out, and it's going to carry you to the next 30 years. So I'm like, wow, that's a very telling moment in my career to say, one, am I going to grow as an individual, and am I going to expand, and am I going to learn new things? And I think that, coupled with, man, do I want to be that person at 65 that says, man, this was my life.
Right. Yeah. This is what I
did.
So I want to go back to something you said, and you were talking about when you had to lay off your staff, and that's awful. Anyone that's had to do that, and I have had to do those types of things in my career, and have had them done to me. And you said that was eye opening for you. What was eye opening about that? Was it that, man, you can this sucks to do this, and I don't want to have to do this, or was it you can have a decades long career, do the right things, be a great employee, and absolutely none of that could matter if the company needs you to go for some reason, because of a downturn or whatever economic reason, you can just go. Was that what was eye opening, or was it the other?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of those. I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of those. Remember I started off with Blue Cross of California, so it's one entity. Now we've morphed into this behemoth of a company, right?
Right.
So with that there's inherent change in everything. So what we were going through at the top levels of leadership was kind of this revolving door of new people coming in. And it really felt like you had to prove yourself over and over again. So that was one part of the equation, Justin. Again, the other piece is, yes, you can be there, and you've sacrificed, and you've been very loyal to the company, and a drop of the hat, you're gone.
Right.
And then, from the standpoint of where we were at as an overall organization, we were seeing every year right around the first quarter, or early second quarter, seeing these layoffs happen and occur, and it was becoming more and more frequent and much larger. So becomes the point like, well, when is it my turn? At some point,
right? At some point, they're going to draw my lottery ball, and
right.
If you look at that, and they're publicly traded, so you start saying, okay, are you backstopping loss with layoffs?
Right.
Essentially, and hopefully that's not the case. But it certainly, if I were in the company, I would think that,
right,
100%. But so those pivotal moments happen, and you start evaluating. Man, do I want to be that guy? Right? I want that to happen to me? Either way, do I want to have no control over my future within the company, or do I want to have control? And when I'm retired, think back and go, what I did really didn't amount to much. And because I've had this conversation with someone before, and I said, a corporate structure is pretty interesting, especially if it's a large company. You can feel like you're making a real difference, and when you leave, it's like throwing a rock into a pond. There's a huge disruption for a moment, and then it's like the rock was never there.
Right.
And And I think you're exactly right to think, especially when you go back and you say, we're this work family. We've been around each other for 20 years. Well, you were around each other 20 years because you had to be for 8 hours a day or however long, right?
Right.
So when you get to that point and you have that thought around, man, I don't want to be that guy either way, how do you get to the next level where you pull the trigger and say, I'm going to do something on my own?
Yeah. And let me add one personal story to that.
Sure.
That was integral as well is I remember very distinctly and clearly, I put in a lot of hours for the company, and oftentimes I would work into the night, and this one particular night, my son comes in. I think he's about 3 or 4 years old at this time, and he comes in, and I've got this presentation that I'm working on, and it was due first thing in the morning, and so I had to get it out, and I was not in a good mood because I'd been just grinding for so long, and he came in and he just wanted dad time, and very distinctly, man, I just said, get out, in this
right.
fit of rage.
Yeah, very aggressive.
Oh man, and I took a step back, and at that point I said, enough. It was, again, a light bulb moment went off, and I said, I'm not going to do this to my son. This is ridiculous. He doesn't know any better. He's such at such a impressionable age,
right? And
he's going to absorb those emotions and feelings that I'm giving him. And so I said, something's got to change here. So personally, and then my wife and I were just working all the time. She worked for the same company as well, so we both had very, very prominent positions, and we did very well. I mean, we had a well over $1 million home. We had all the cars, all the fun stuff. But again,
yeah. But none of that matters unless you're willing to just lose everything. And so, and it's such an important lesson. And I've watched people at the executive level and at the entrepreneur level just grind their personal relationships into dust, and I think, I hope that's worth it. Right. And we've all been there, and especially younger in my career, where you think, if I don't do this, then I can't, and you can trick yourself into thinking I'm doing it for them, the family, right. and you're really, what you're doing is it can be very destructive. So it's true that happens, and it's good that you were able to, in that moment, say, oh man, I responded not the way I want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, all those pieces came together, and my wife and I just said, look, we need to do something different. What does that look like? Again, going back to my grandfather's mentality of, here he is, a manager of the gas company, and then he's grinding it out at night, trying to make something really work and transition out of his corporate job. And so for me, again,
was he ever able to do that? Make that transition over and say, I have my own shop?
No, because to your earlier point, it became a factor of, do I want to continue down this path and grind it out and not be there for my kids and my wife? And that's where he had to make a decision. He was building it up so his partner could take on some more of the responsibilities, and his partner failed him in that manner.
Yeah.
So it was, he couldn't do it all by himself,
right.
and he had he had a reputation of doing amazing quality work at
right.
affordable prices at that time. So for him, he was not going to risk his reputation, and he had to shut it down. But I mean, he had an amazing business, and many people around town, you were like, your grandfather was amazing. Like,
sure.
He helped me out in so many different ways. So
yeah, there's so many stories like that where you just, it's going great, and then just one or two things don't work out.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so you're now looking back to when you were a child and saying, man, I know what it takes to do this. And so you and your wife agree, hey, we've got to do something different. And then what?
Yeah, so we, again, goes back to Kevin and Gretchen. Kevin is a regional vice president of investment firm, and so he said, hey, why don't you just start with me part-time? You can get your brokerage license and see if you can make something out of the business on a part-time basis. So that's what I did. I mean, I studied, I went on appointments, I really just poured my heart into the business, and became fairly successful fairly quick. So it gave me enough confidence and revenue generating opportunities to make that switch. And so we did that, and so we left Anthem, which was obviously a very scary moment in my life. It's your identity is wrapped up in that corporate job,
and there's so much comfort there too, right? This is here, man, and I can do this for another 30 years. It might be a slow death, but I can do it,
right?
And we'll live very comfortably for the next 30 years.
Right.
But yeah, it's certainly scary.
It is, and there's no, to your point, no safety net, no insurance for the family. So it was truly a leap of faith, as one would say. And I think that's where my mind kind of goes to, is risk versus reward. And for us, we were willing to risk it all, to say, let's give it a shot. We place a bet on us. And a lot of people, they're not willing to do that. And I get it. But again, for us, that moment where we said, is this the next 30 years of our life? And for me personally, if I'm not growing, I'm dying inside.
Right.
And so my spirit, Justin, I was in such an entanglement.
You just felt crushed. Yeah, you're just like,
man. I knew I had to do something, whatever that looked like.
Right.
I knew, I'm a faithful guy, so I look to Christ, me personally, and so I knew from a faith perspective that, hey, God's got me.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Absolutely, He's always been there through good times, bad times. I know that there's going to be bumps.
Sure,
there's going to be those roadblocks.
Well, and I'm Christian also. We're never promised no bumps, right?
Right.
It's almost promised bumps,
right?
More than you should have sometimes. So
exactly.
So yeah, I think that's important to understand, that sometimes it is just that you just go, man, I got to do something different. Don't know what that looks like, but through faith and through confidence in your ability, we'll be okay. It may not look like we're okay right now, but it will be okay.
Right. Absolutely. And so through that, built a nice little business. But what was happening in Colorado at the time was this legalization of cannabis came into play. And again, going back to my history and wanting to heal and help people was always in the forefront of my mind. And so through the business, through the investment business, I was fortunate enough to meet some of the operators in the cannabis business, and they became some of my clients. And so through that, though, I really started to understand more about cannabis. I was very opposed to it. I think I bought into a lot of the propaganda that many of us have been told for many, many years. And coming from a traditional healthcare background, right, the insurance and going to pharma.
Pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
Right. So I was definitely, that was ingrained. But when my dad got cancer back in 2012, and he came to live with us, him and my mom, one of the areas as he was going through his radiation treatment was he was getting a lot of pain, and he was having trouble eating. So my wife was like, "Look, let's try cannabis. Let's just try it." And so she actually made some rubs and really helped with his pain.
Wow.
And with his appetite, getting that back. So for us, I was like, man, maybe there's something more to this.
Sure.
And so that's when we started to really learn more about it. And I always kept that in the back of our mind. So, fast forward a couple years, then, I have clients and really started to understand the medicinal and therapeutic benefits of it. And I said, man, I need to at least be involved in some form or fashion. And so I was able to connect with a group that, had a grow and a manufacturing license, and I was helping them really get things started there. And
when is this year-wise?
This is in 2016.
Okay.
2016.
So really kind of at the forefront of, you see dispensaries all over now in different states that you would never think you'd see them, like Oklahoma. And so you're kind of at the forefront of that. And you're in Colorado at this time.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're starting to see, man, maybe I need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, and again, you're seeing some of these numbers come out saying, "Hey, this is a multi-billion-dollar market from a business standpoint," but also, hey, it's helping people therapeutically from autism to epilepsy, seizures, even Parkinson's disease, cancers. So there was a whole host of therapeutic benefits I was seeing as I was starting to get acclimated to the industry. But where I found myself going back to again was with some of these operators saying, all right, well, let's really take a look at your business model. Let's understand what your growth trajectory is going to look like. What are your operating costs today? How do you want to grow and scale that business? Really what was lacking in the industry was you had these black market growers entering into this legal space with a lot of these corporate individuals or investors that came in and just gave these guys a ton of money without a really solid business strategy and plan to back. So that's where I really came in and got my, cut my teeth in the industry, was really helping a company grow, or not grow, but helped a company have some seed capital early on, or some additional seed capital, and then grow that particular strategy for the company. And we ended up exiting. They ended up selling the entity very successfully. So that was my first venture, and then the next one was taking a medical device and through the FDA qualification and approval process, and so really starting to understand the industry from seed to sale. And starting to work with these compounds and understanding them better. So by the end of 2017, 2018, I was really starting to pick all the constituent parts of the cannabis plant apart. So why is THC so vital important? Why is CBD and all the minor cannabinoids important, the flavonoids, the terpenes, all of them work so synergistically together. And I started to play around with different formulations. And so it just was this moment where I was like a kid in a candy store.
Right, because you get to learn new stuff, right?
Yeah.
You get to learn new stuff. And you're doing this all with an investor hat on, right? This is when you're working with the investment company, correct?
Yeah, so I'm doing both, right? So I'm doing my day job, I'm meeting with clients, getting new clients, and then out in the part time when I can fit it in, I'm really starting to really develop this passion for the industry and understand it fully. And so that really then it became a point where I really needed to switch the focus, because you can only dabble so long before you either make the decision to get out of it or you go all in. And that's when I made the decision to go all in and shift and go full time into cannabis. And so that was 2019 when I made that decision.
And what did that look like? So you said you leave the investment world and you say, okay, I'm in now. So it's interesting, you've gone 20 years doing the same thing, and in a span of 4 years,
right,
something like that, you switched twice.
Right.
And is that because once you made that leap the first time and realized, oh, this worked, my skill set does translate across industries, it made it that much easier to do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I built out that foundation of making sure that things are settled financially before I go and make that leap, and then obviously where the market opportunity is and where my passion is. So when those things align, it's an easy decision to make at that point in time, right?
Yeah, and that first thing being aligned, the finances in line, that makes it really easy. Right, it makes it definitely a lot less uncomfortable. Right,
absolutely. And what I will say is that, look, I've had to pay my way into. I've had to expense my own education in this industry. For many, as my wife says, many months and a few years, we've had to cover our own costs and expenses through this entire process and growth period. So you look back, like all the money that I've saved, whether retirement and savings, that was eventually all gone because I had to support my family and make up where the entrepreneur life didn't. So again, that's another thing that you have to be prepared for. That says, if I lost everything, would it be worth the risk? And that was something that we said, absolutely.
Because, and again, that faith, number one, and then number two, faith in yourself, knowing that if we lost everything tomorrow, we had to restart, it would suck, but we could do it.
Right.
And so now you're out of the investment world, you're into just cannabis at this time.
Yep.
Right. And you had, tell me what that looked like your entry into that market. Were you growing? Did you partner with someone that already had a growth operation? What did that look like?
Yeah. So we partnered with a company that already had a license. So we can go out and distribute, our patented vaporizer pen there in Colorado. And so for 2 years, we grinded it out, man. It was.
So did you work to get the patent on the pen?
Yeah, with partners. Yep.
So is that something that existed when you partnered with them? The inner workings for the patent,
they filed the patents.
Okay.
So they filed the patents, but in terms of doing the overall R&D and refining it, that was a lot of what me and my partners did with the pen. So we were very integral in with the overall design and the functionality of
the point I'm making is you didn't jump in with a partner that already had a patented product. It's something you had to work to achieve. And so then that patent gets put in place, and those are critical.
Right.
Wildcat we have several proprietary oil tools that we patented, and that's not an easy or cheap process.
Right. Exactly.
So I do understand a bit about that. And so now you've got this vaporizer pen patented, and you go to market with it.
Yep. We went to market, and Justin, it was a complete grind. I mean,
sure.
To go in and start from scratch and build a brand and really go against some of the larger, at that point in time, you've had these companies really start to grow into their own and snatch up a major market share.
Sure.
Now we had something very different and differentiated, and in our perspective, that was a healthier version because everything we did was medical grade.
The other stuff you said was from China.
Yeah, so everything that was on the market was based off of a nicotine design, because it was all very, very popular in the e-juice world of tobacco, really taking that turn for the last decade at that time from more cigarette type model to more the e-juice model. And what people don't know is a lot of those parts that they've made in China, a lot of them contain lead in them. There's plastics. So again, when you're thinking about a medical device, you're inhaling that. So when you're inhaling something, what we use or use the term in medical terms is bioavailability. So you're absorbing a majority of all the compounds that you're inhaling. So as a byproduct, you're inhaling lead, you're inhaling whatever compounds that are in there, as well as heating that device up. And now a lot of it is plastic. So if you heat it up over a certain temperature, well, then what happens is it starts to degrade that plastic, and thereby it leaches into the oil, and you're consuming that.
Is that PCBs or I can't remember what it's called. It's something that's not good in plastics that you don't want to heat it up and inhale it. But
absolutely.
And so yours doesn't. That pen didn't have any of that stuff. It was all medical grade, and what you were inhaling then with your pen was just what you wanted to be.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, so a lot of leaking was prevalent in the issue, prevalent issue back in the day. So we handle all those problems. We took care of all the the medical grade parts in there to make sure that it was going to withstand any FDA type of backlash that those device makers could have gotten at the time. So we went all above board with the pen, and so we started to see some sales. And this was pivotal. This was a turning point in business again for us and my partnership. Is we had a partner that the agreement was they had a medical license, and after 6 months they were to receive their recreational license. Well, they had a lot of issues with one of their partners, and long story short, they were not able to get their recreational license. Now, for us, as the device maker and going out to the market, that was 90% of the market share.
Recreational use.
The recreational,
sure.
Yeah. So medical accounted for a very small population, and when you consider that a majority of medical patients are buying pounds of flour, and they're not looking to vape pens, these are very sophisticated and savvy type of consumers. So they're not really looking for vaporizer devices. Even though we did find a nice niche and we did find customers there, still
primarily the recreational user, that was going to purchase your device and use your device.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So after literally close to 2 years of grinding that out to just stay afloat, the entity then that we partnered with, they went ahead and went full bore into CBD. They relinquished all their licenses and turned that back over to a non-operating cannabis business. They have what's considered a CBD manufacturing. So we were out of the market. And so again, that was a decision point that we had to make as an organization. Are we going to continue on this, or do we need to shift and pivot? And that's when, through my connections, I really started to work in the CBD arena as well with some clients, and built up a nice network of individuals in the CBD hemp business, and met my partner to this day, Sean Fleming. He had a company called Psycheceutical, and he was launching one of the largest vertically integrated operations in North America, Columbia Basin Bioscience up in Hermiston, Oregon. So he and I had hit it off, and we always said, hey, we're going to do some business together. And so during that time, again, God closes one door, another one opens. At that time, it became evident that Sean was ready to grow and expand his entities, and so I came on board with him and really helped to develop those business strategies for several of his businesses that he was invested in. And one of them was the one of the technologies that we eventually licensed for Psycheceutical, my company now. So helped him build and put some structure and rigor into his business, and then Columbia Basin launched very successfully, and we're kicking butt in that industry with our partner Alan Cleaver up there, and then built and developed a strategy for his patents that he owned with his partner Dr. Ron Longden, a neuropsychiatrist, neurologist in Sarasota, Florida. So again, Justin, it's pivoting and not getting discouraged when things are not working as planned, and sometimes that vision and some of that changes as you go along. And that's one thing I had to remind myself, that sometimes there's a moment where you kind of take a pause in life, and you do some reflection, and you just keep moving forward. Because it would have been very easy for my wife and I to say, let's go back to the corporate world, and because it gets very stressful as being an entrepreneur, not having that safety net when you got 4 kids and you're barely making ends meet. So it was very easy to have those conversations, and we said, do we want to go back and erase that decision and go back to where we were
Sure.
several years
Sure.
ago. So we made the conscious decision that we're going to make this work no matter what. And, thank God my wife is who she is, and she's obviously my biggest cheerleader and supporter, and has been just amazing. Her level of confidence in me when at times I didn't have it, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, sometimes my wife has the same thing with me, and sometimes I think, you've got a problem. You can't be seeing the right thing here. But I think that's important, and I know it's critical. If you don't have that support at home, you're going to be constantly looking over your shoulder, and that's going to cause you to hesitate in what you're doing, and ultimately lead to not the success that you want.
Right.
So you're still not too psychoceutical. You're still just in cannabis.
Right.
And so, in what year are we in now?
We are in
Probably
early 2020.
Okay. So, and there was nothing going on early 2020. Nothing happened.
Early 2020.
Nothing affected the world at all. It was just real smooth.
Right. Exactly.
Real smooth sailing.
Yeah.
It's perfect time to be doing all of that stuff. And so you guys, and he's currently still your business partner.
Yes.
Yeah. So you guys are just in cannabis, and then what? Then what do you do?
Yeah. Then we really start looking at his patents. So he had invested in technology called NeuroDirect, again with Dr. Ronald Ogden, and they had really struggled with the business model and plan to take those patents through the FDA clinical trial pathway. So at that point, I really started to dig into these patents, the viability of them, and how can we monetize them, either through license agreements with big pharma, or
and these patents relied on cannabis, right? They were around that.
No, actually, they were any neuroaffective drug. So anything that neurologically, so you can take any Parkinson's drug, Alzheimer's, anything that's going to has a neuroeffectiveness to it.
I got you.
From a compound perspective, and that's cannabis, psychedelics. So any molecule.
Is that what was creating the challenge going through the FDA? Is that it could administer non-traditional narcotics?
Really, the challenge was just putting together a strategy.
I got you,
Justin. Again, it goes back to, doctors. They are very good at what they do, but many of them, 99% of the time, they're not entrepreneurs.
Well, they didn't go to medical school to own businesses.
Right.
They went to be doctors.
Right. So you have this doctor that's got this amazing IP, but he just doesn't know how to really build the structure and framework of a strategy that he can go out and you need to raise a significant amount of capital. So he did all the hard work, right? He did all the R&D.
He's got the degrees. He got the everything. He understands how it works.
Right.
But he can't do the next thing.
Right.
To make it go to market.
Yeah, and again, going through the FDA is a very complicated, very expensive process. So you're talking, oftentimes, 50, 100 million plus.
Sure.
To go through that process. So it's no small feat and undertaking. And so at that point in time, I really started to engage a friend of mine who I met in the cannabis industry through one of my other business partners, Dave Mahalik. He is the CEO and co-founder of Coeptis Pharmaceuticals. And they were, at the time, really transitioning their business strategy from more of what we consider in the pharma space a 505(b)(2) model, where you're just taking existing drugs on the market and utilizing them in a different format. So whether it be an inhalation or intranasally,
sure,
it's just a different way. And that model really had died on the vine with some of the regulations that Trump put into place to kind of eliminate that model. So from that perspective, Dave said, hey, let's look at cannabis several years ago, and just wasn't the right fit. And so I called him back up in 2020, and I said, hey, Dave, we've got some patents here. Would love you to do some due diligence on it. Tell me what you think, as my first real litmus test to gauge whether or not this is viable or not. And so got him involved, brought in some industry experts, and we said, yeah, I think we got something here that we can work with this. And so what we did in late 2020 is really start to build the framework of a company. And first we were really thinking about, to your point, going through the cannabis model, but the psychedelic revolution was really starting to make headwaves, and the early clinical results from psilocybin and MDMA were off the charts in terms of PTSD, anxiety, depression. So we said,
and those are debilitating mental issues, and right. Anyone that's known anyone with those, it's the worst.
Right.
It's extremely, it's devastating.
Yeah, and just think about this, Justin. We're using and employing methods and models, treatment models, that were really built around 80s technology, right? We think about SSRIs today, which really account for a very low effectiveness rate. And quite honestly, many people just stop taking them altogether because of the lack of effectiveness and or as a result of a lot of the side effects. So we're dealing with an overall mental health treatment model that's clearly needs breakthrough therapies, from diagnosing and having imaging tools to help guide physicians. Because today, in today's model, you're given kind of a Hamilton depression scale, and you've got, in many instances, a psychologist or psychotherapist is kind of running through a battery of tests, and then they'll basically, kind of throw a dart at the dartboard. A little more sophisticated than that, but
you get the analogy for sure.
Yeah, so you're trying to then look at specific diagnosis and then customize some formulations and different, or not formulation, but SSRIs that'll treat the patient's need. But again, it's so ineffective. There's so many side effects, and one of the biggest areas that SSRIs does not tackle is suicidal ideation. So there is no known treatment on the market today for that. And so that's a big market opportunity, obviously coming on the heels of COVID and the pandemic.
And that sure seems like a side effect you want to get a handle on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, good grief.
Yeah. And so, just think about this. This is in November of 2020, right? We get January, the news that COVID hits, right? And then we go in lockdowns in March. And now we've got 8 months under our belt of really looking at COVID and the impact there, the fear that's been propagated, right? And the isolation and the kids and everybody in between. Right. Now we've got this state of global mental.
It's an unbelievable science project on a global scale.
Right.
And my sincerest hope is that we look at it as a people and say, okay, well, this is what that causes. So how do we treat that? And right now, the current treatments can actually propagate the problem in some cases as a side effect. And so I think that it's critical that we understand that, and then you guys have some unique solutions that are not in the mainstream. But are starting to get some traction.
Right.
So that's great. And so what are so at this point, Psycheceutical is an entity, right? It was founded when?
It was founded in December of 2020.
Okay. So the end of the first year of COVID. So you said, hey, let's do this. Did you at that point start branching away from just looking at cannabis, or had you already started that?
Yeah, we started to look at certainly incorporating cannabis at that point in time with the technology. But what was very evident is that psychedelics was taking a very unique approach. The approach that I would have probably more liked to have seen in cannabis, where you've got, and you're going to have all these different train of thoughts and different opinions, but cannabis again is not for everybody. So when we make this blanket statement that cannabis is It's certainly therapeutic, but it needs to be taken in the right context and the right dosage and the right form.
Mm-hmm.
So where I saw the opportunity in cannabis, I certainly was seeing a major opportunity in psychedelics because they were taking more of the traditional farm approach, which right, wrong, or indifferent. There's pros and cons to that. But the pros is that now you can really start to hone in on what molecule works for what disease states or conditions. How do we develop it in a very strict manner? Because again, if you take cannabis, and look, I know some of these operators where they're touching these plants and they're touching these oils without gloves. They're not using it, and they're not developing it in a CGMP environment and very strict protocols that we have with pharmaceutical manufacturing, and that's essentially what we've done in cannabis is have this kind of Wild West approach.
Sure.
Well,
I think that goes back to, like you mentioned before, the early days of it was, okay, now we can do this legally, so you get a lot of black market growers. They're not scientists.
Right.
They're guys that grew this stuff sometimes in their closet and just, now I know how to do this really well.
Yeah.
And here's a bunch of money to do that. So the idea would be, you do need true scientists looking at how do you isolate this specific component to treat this specific condition.
Right. Yeah, and again, it's paired too in many instances, and I liken this to, and this is why I'm so passionate about mental health. Again, going back to my early history with my mom losing her dad early on, and seeing what that did to her, emotionally, and that mental challenge that she developed. And she was on Prozac and other medicines. And I just saw the negative side effects. Many times she just didn't have a personality.
You're right. And sometimes that medication, traditional treatments for depression, whatever, it just essentially turns that person into just a zombie type thing. And they're just there and you said, like you said, almost devoid of personality or emotion.
Right.
And I think everyone would agree that that's not what we're looking for. We're looking to return this person to a functioning, member of the world that enjoys being around, not just zone them out where they just don't feel.
Right. Yeah. And again, looking at the cannabis industry in that same kind of light, where you've got these very profound and therapeutic products, but you don't have an actual prescribing physician to tell you what kind of formulation you truly need, what part of the plant and ratio do you truly need for your condition. And then in some instances it'd be very helpful that if you're administering cannabis, to have a trained therapist where you can walk through some of these deep-rooted traumas that a lot of us just have inherently. It's amazing how one little thing from our childhood, which could be seen as nothing, is a stored memory, and we store it in our tissue. So there's a constant reminder of things that you probably never even thought of, but your body automatically absorbed that. So we're very complex beings, and so using these therapeutic plants in the right set and setting are absolutely amazing when combined, again, right setting and a therapeutic clinical sense, if you will.
Sure. But that takes an actual scientist to figure that out. And it takes someone to look at it the way that they would look at prescribing traditional medication.
Right.
And so in order to have that sort of level of accuracy and level of attention, you've got to put this stuff through amazing scrutiny, I would imagine.
Right. Yep.
So how are you bridging the gap between the perception of, man, I'm taking drugs, and the war on drugs and just say no and all of that, and while there are some merits there for sure, it definitely will cause people to have some reservations. My parents are in their 70s and they live in Oklahoma now, and they can get marijuana and stuff there from dispensaries, and my dad was dealing with quite a lot of nerve pain down his leg and stuff like that, and surgery wasn't an option at the moment, and so I was like, why don't you do that and just see if it helps? And he's like, well, that's marijuana. And I was like, yeah, and it'll probably help you. And how do you get that message out to that generation and others that look at the non-traditional treatments, the psychedelics especially, and think of it as, man, all I'm doing is just taking drugs?
Yeah, I think more than ever,
when that's what you're doing with pharmaceuticals anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, more than ever, I think part of that question that we need to ask ourselves is, Justin, is more than ever, we've seen this media propaganda machine, right? Especially the last couple of years, where we've seen a lot of the information being called out as true, and a couple of years later, a few months later, it's not. So I think what we need to take a look at society is look at the data and look at the fact, the true data and the true fact.
So you're right. You mentioned that the traditional, pharmaceutical approach that we've seen over the last few years, you'll have one set of information come out saying it's effective and all of that, and then sometime later, a year, 2 years, whatever, it turns out that they weren't being completely honest about that. How are you guarding against that? Because the flip side of the coin would be you can make the exact same argument, with the non-traditional, the psychedelics or cannabis or whatever. How do you guard against that information, being compromised as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to where are you getting your information. So certainly traditional pharma has a natural. You have this love-hate relationship with the consumer, if you will, where they do a lot of things right, and then there's some things that they just do extremely wrong. And case in point is the opioid disorder, right?
Sure, yeah. I think, did you watch Dope Sick?
Yes.
That was a great series.
Yes.
And I think it opens people's eyes a lot. It opened mine, and you're just like, man. At the end of the day, you're like, well, it is a business,
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, the opioid crisis it continues to be just devastating.
Right. Absolutely. And so what I would challenge people is to do your own research and really go to sources that you can kind of make an educated guess at. And so when I was really looking at cannabis and psychedelics, I looked at what's the safety and efficacy profile. Traditionally and historically, what have we seen in terms of deaths and overdoses? Well, in cannabis, we really have 0 cases of death. Now, they'll say there's 1 or 2 here, but in terms of the overall usage of cannabis,
right,
the safety profile is there. I mean, it's unrefutable evidence.
Yeah, it's not. It's definitely not. Let's say you find some outliers. It's 1 or 2.
Right.
I don't know what the number is, but you're not going to find just mass people dying from taking too much cannabis. That just doesn't happen. So the safety for sure is there. Then the next question is the efficacy, like you said. Right. Is it actually helping where we want it to help?
Yep.
And again, that is something that you'd have to prove. So,
right.
And I think you mentioned, where you get your source of information or where you get your information from. And I know me personally, when all of the stuff with COVID was, still out there, right? And there's still certain levels of propaganda or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
For me personally, I trusted my personal doctor, and I would just ask, hey, what would you do?
Right.
And then whatever he said is coupled with, some independent research here and there, but you want to be able to trust that person is, if he's known you for an extended period of time and he wants the best thing for you. What are some other sources of information that you would use to sort of, qualify treatment or qualify some information that you were researching.
Yeah, I mean, so when I really looked into cannabis and certainly psychedelics, you look at some of the great publishing publishers like Science Magazine, Nature Magazine, PubMed.
You don't go to High Times and
no. I think that's going to be a little biased.
Potentially so.
So I really try and take a wide approach. Certainly, those they put forth rigor and structure, and take a more academia approach, and then you really start to look at more of historically how have people responded to these plant-based compounds, right? So then you look at indigenous tribes, and you start to query individuals that have used it in ceremonial practices, right? And so again, we're not seeing the death rates or the propaganda, if you will, that was exposed through our media. So for me, it was about, all right, let's take a what are we seeing in the news? We don't see any deaths as a result of marijuana that is newsworthy, or I've never seen one.
I can't think of a single story like so and so overdosed from marijuana use. No.
Right. So from that standpoint, are we seeing people drop dead, or do we know somebody, or those are the kind of critical thinking skills that I employ, right? When I'm learning and I'm researching, like, use some common sense and critical thinking skills, and then go to sources and really start to tie things together. So you really need to not just go, oh, I'm going to CNN or I'm going to Fox News and get my
right.
I mean that I think we're all beyond that.
I think so too. But I wonder sometimes when like my peer group, we're all a little bit ahead of that curve, I think. But man, I don't know what the mass. We're a big country,
right?
So,
right.
There's a lot of people out there that may not be on the same page, but
right.
But yeah, and so to your point, I think when you're looking at the non-pharmaceutical treatments, the plant-based treatments, they're natural, right? These are naturally occurring things, and I think that you do have to go back and look at the history of the use of them. And I would hope that if I were looking at how to treat something, I would look at safety first,
right,
ahead of efficacy. And because if it's effective, but it kills 60% of the people that do it, well then I would argue it's not effective.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't think death is the outcome of a medical treatment that you want to achieve. So,
right.
So tell me some of the things that Psycheceutical has coming up, or you guys have a really interesting group of people in the company. One of them's name is Zappy. That's pretty interesting. Yep. And I mean, it's just a real eclectic collection of people, and I think it's a really cool mission. So, as we kind of get to the end of this thing, what are some things that you want people to know about Psycheceutical and what they're going to bring to the world, or are bringing to the world?
Yeah, we have a really great group of individuals that are really passionate about mental health disorders and neurological disorders. I think first and foremost, we understand that the epidemic, the global epidemic, is not COVID, even though that did sweep through, and we understand the destruction that's done. But moreover, and more now than ever, the global mental health crisis is now in the forefront of everybody's mind. Previously, we've always just dealt with it, and I like to say, you beat the drum long enough, it's going to fall on deaf ears, and that's what
sure.
That's what the mental, that's what our mental state and the global mental health crisis has done for so many decades now. Is we've had these issues, and we just never had a solution. And so, for the first time now, we've got hope in these plant-based compounds. So what we've done at Psycheceutical is really take a very comprehensive approach. Again, when you're starting and establishing any business, you look at what's the problem and what's the solution.
Sure.
Right. So for us, again, going back to patented technologies, making sure that we've got a firm foundation of which we solve fundamental issues with psychedelics. The inherent issues with psychedelics are what we consider a first pass metabolism. And it goes back to dosage. Solving the dosage problem, meaning that I can deliver a very minimal amount of the drug to the targeted area in the body. And so taking and using that lens and measurement, with our technologies, we can do just that, is utilize a very nominal amount of the compounds and deliver them safely and effectively. That's certainly the approach we've taken and hope to achieve once our final formulations hit the market. So we had to start off with a firm foundation. Mm-hmm. Those two very distinct technologies, one the NeuroDirect, the other the Janus particle multiphasic technology that we licensed, give us a wide range of manufacturing capabilities of creating very specific and targeted molecules. So from that foundation, what we did is we said, from a business perspective, we have to have individuals that are well known and recognized globally from the science community. We also have to have individuals from a media and PR perspective, mm-hmm. right? Because when you're starting off new and you're trying to enter into space and you're the new little guy,
sure,
you've got to create some type of media buzz, and you have to have that presence to attract and bring in investors to your company.
Sure.
So what Zappy has done the last several years, Zappy Zappelin is very interesting.
Aside from wearing the grooviest glasses that you can.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy.
He's an amazing individual, and what's amazing about Zappy is his history. So he started off with Bear Stearns, one of the youngest VPs in the late 80s. And looking at him today...
and you look at him, you go, man, that's a Bear Stearns VP.
Yeah.
100% when you look at him.
Exactly. And so...
that's just what he looks like.
Right.
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
And so he made a name for himself really predicting trends, like the internet trend, the
mm-hmm.
.com trend, and domain names, and that cannabis, and certainly now psychedelics. But for him, and what's profound and what resonates with many people in psychedelic community and those who want to know more about it, is his ability to connect, where he had a very successful career, and then came to this moment and realization that, what is this all for? What is the meaning of life? I've made tens of millions of dollars, but I'm no more happier than mm-hmm. than the next guy. And what is the true meaning of life? Right? We all get to that state of our life, like I did early on,
sure,
several years ago. And so he really embraced psychedelics from the medicinal standpoint. His first movie documentary he had made was Reality of Truth with Michelle Rodriguez, and he really wanted to take her through that experience because she was suffering after the death of her co-star Paul Walker.
Right.
And it really put her in this deep, dark place. And so Zappy said, hey, let's go to the jungles of Peru. Let's have this shamanic healing experience. And so you guys can watch that movie. But through that, it really helped her heal.
Where is that movie?
You can find it on Netflix.
It's on Netflix?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yep. I think you can even, it's on YouTube. You can mm-hmm. buy it for $2.99 or rent it or whatever. So from that perspective, he was able to bring in a lot of mainstream personalities like Oprah Winfrey, Deepak Chopra. Many within the science community mm-hmm. were interviewed as part of the film. So he brought this eclectic group of, world-renowned scientists, doctors, as well as actors and entertainers that we all know. And so his ability to tell the story and bring people closer to actually what occurs with these molecules mm-hmm. and how they heal people is something that was very important to us as a company, because as you mentioned earlier, Justin, it's educating people in the right manner.
Right.
When you use these plant-based molecules in the right set and setting, the right dosage, and again, we've got data to support that, then it becomes mainstream that these will be widely accepted and adopted because we've done the research, and I always tell everybody, go do your own research. But you can see that from LSD to MDMA, ketamine, which is now was developed in the 60s, ibogaine, ayahuasca, so many of these plant-based compounds that if you deliver them effectively in the right set and setting are hugely effective. I mean, we're talking about ibogaine. That's something that we're working on as well for the treatment of various addiction disorders. We're talking about breaking, years old addiction patterns in 24 hours.
Wow.
So you're
and
talking
how ironic that you're breaking an addiction pattern with that. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. And so the more that we start to undertake and go through this clinical process, we can understand these compounds better, but we can also know when to administer them and find out what the right indication for these compounds are, because psilocybin is not going to be a catch-all for all mental health disease states and disorders. We know that for a fact, but maybe MDMA is, or maybe LSD is. So these compounds, again, if you look at their track record, if you deliver them safely and effectively, you're going to find that they're very safe. And I think that's a lot of what the propaganda says, because again, remember, these are used as party drugs.
Absolutely.
So they're mixed with so many other synthetic chemicals and byproducts, and as we know now, fentanyl.
Yeah.
So if they're manufactured in the same way that pharmaceuticals are, that changes the whole conversation.
Right, because it's not a street drug that you're being administered. It's an actual scientifically manufactured treatment.
Right.
And so would you anticipate that these would require a prescription from a doctor to get? So they would be at the same level as any other, drug like that that's a pharmacy drug?
Yep, absolutely. So we would certainly go through the rigors and the regulatory process and procedures of taking these through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and ultimately to commercialization. So yes, we would have those same rigors where we're studying them in preclinicals, where you've got testing that occurs to look for toxicity, for safety, and certainly efficacy in animals, and then it goes to human trials, and you select the patient population that you're going after. So for like our first drug compound is we're taking ketamine with our NeuroDirect formulation, and now with what we've already seen with Dr. Ogden, he has what's considered a non-GLP study, meaning what that means is there's no formal FDA study, so you can't consider it an end-all be-all study, but I'll just say highlights. It's been very, very profound what we've seen, and so that's our first drug that we're bringing to the market, formulation for PTSD. So, and that's for the chronic usage of it. So again, there's no known compounds today on the market that overcome PTSD. It's one of those holy grail areas where you can bring something to the market, you're solving a huge problem, because remember, PTSD encompasses anxiety, depression. I mean, it really is a kind of the umbrella, if you will, of the diagnosis out there.
Right, and PTSD, when you hear that, at least when I hear that, I immediately think of soldiers. But really anyone who's gone through any sort of a traumatic event will have varying degrees of PTSD, and so, or can have.
Right.
And so, to your point, to be able to treat them is going to be not only life-changing for them, but it's going to be world-changing for all of us. So, man, really impressive stuff. And I knew when I met you, I was like, well, at the very least, I want to have a conversation and get to know you better but also learn more about this stuff. But where can people learn more about you, about Psycheceutical, and about all the amazing work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website, psycheceutical.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can follow Zappy as well. He's doing a lot of events. A matter of fact, this Thursday, probably not being released, but Thursday the 14th, what's today?
Today's the 15th, I think.
15th, okay.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, so it's tomorrow, the 16th, he's hosting an event with Rick Doblin, the founder of MAPS. So he's hosting an event for psychedelic investors and educating that community. So I highly encourage to follow Zappy because he is a big voice in the community. We also... I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I don't have any real traditional social media. It was part of my growth and evolution as an entrepreneur and as a dad and father, where I was allowing social media to really consume my life. So more so Instagram than anything. And I've the only thing I'm on now is LinkedIn. Because again, I have to be very respectful of my time and my family's time.
I think that's great. I think that's a decision that all of us probably should be willing to make. And I think the hesitancy to make that decision sometimes is that you think it's going to compromise your success. But I think you'll attest, and I've made decision in my life around, and officing from home now helps quite a bit. But I've seen nothing but more success as a result. So, Chad, thanks so much for coming and hanging out and telling your story. It's been great. Welcome to Texas.
Thank you.
Also,
love it.
Will this be your first summer in Texas?
First summer. Well, we moved here in August of last year.
Oh, that doesn't count. That's the tail end of the summer. It's still hot, but
yeah,
this is your first real one.
First real one. Yep.
So welcome.
Yeah. Welcome to the Inferno.
Correct. And then. But man, it's been great talking to you, and I want to check back in a year or so and see where you guys are.
I love that, and again, for those that are thinking about entrepreneurship and really want to have somebody to talk to or what have you. Again, I'm on LinkedIn, Chad Harman. Certainly love to have those conversations and help guide and direct the next set of entrepreneurship. Again, I think overall what you're doing an amazing job of is really highlighting certainly all aspects of entrepreneurship and the skills and the mindset, and certainly the more of the willingness to undergo a transformation and allow yourself to be vulnerable and grow and experience new things in a way that many people want to do, but they don't understand it or know how to start that process. So hopefully through, I know for sure through your podcast and hopefully my story today, you can glean some insights and really get on the way of your journey of entering into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that is really the goal of this. And no doubt there will be people that pick up some valuable insights from this episode. So thank you very much for sharing your time with us, and man, best of luck in everything you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye.